James Harden has opted out of Philly by opting into his contract. He opts into a player option and has requested a trade from the team. This was not on my offseason bingo card for James Harden. The two options for him were very clear. Returning to Philadelphia on a deal that probably looked like 4 years and a lot of money, or going to Houston and just getting a lot of money and notoriety, going back to the Rockets, signing a deal that probably looked like 4 years and a lot of money. The idea of him opting into his player option was kind of floated out there, but never, ever, ever with the idea being that he was going to request a trade from Philly. Now, before I talk about the teams, I have one really important detail that I don't think a lot of other people are going to point out. Bobby Marks on Twitter mentions the fact that if you're trading for James Harden right now this offseason, you are trading for him on a one-year contract. You cannot extend him because of the deals that he signed previously. You cannot trade for him with the idea being, we're going to give him a contract extension as soon as he gets here. You are trading for a 100% bona fide, unrestricted 2024 free agent that is James Harden if you make this trade, which is a catastrophe for Philly because I don't think they're going to get nearly as much as maybe you would expect in exchange for someone in James Harden that is still very, very good. It's an important detail. I want that to be there. Now, 3 teams to mention here. Inexplicably, somehow, I'm sure the Phoenix Suns are going to be involved in this in one way or another. We're getting rumors about Kyrie meeting with them. They, of course, have the DeAndre Ayton piece that they could trade out to get Harden because, you know, what do they need another perimeter ball handler creator guy for, right? They already have a couple of those guys. Why not another one? Ayton obviously would not be going directly to Philadelphia. That would have to be a 3 or a 4-team trade. Ayton does nothing for them, but that I do feel like they have to be mentioned. The other 2 teams that need to be mentioned here are the Clippers and the Knicks. Let's begin with LA and then we'll go to New York and then we'll talk about what a catastrophe this is for Philadelphia. So the Clippers, basically to me, this would have to be like a Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, something like that style trade. More likely, I think Paul George. I don't think if you're a team like Philadelphia, you can risk trading for someone like Kawhi Leonard, given his injury history. Obviously, Paul George has all this injury history as well, but there's more uncertainty with Kawhi, and I think Paul George ultimately has more value as a result of that. And that's a relatively clean fit. You can swap those 2 guys. The Clippers have been in desperate need of like a lead guard creator guy ever since they got rid of SGA and brought in, Kawhi and PG. I don't really know why either team would do that because Philly is introducing a situation where now they're waiting on Paul George to get healthy all the time, and the Clippers are trading for someone in James Harden that is on a 1-year deal, and they're opening this new arena next year, and they're going to want to be good next year. I'm sure Harden will be interested in that, but honestly, if I'm the Clippers, I don't really know why I'm doing that, given the fact that you can't extend him. And then, of course, the Knicks. The Knicks are always going to be rumored. Anytime one of these big-time players come up, they've been interested in Dame. They were interested in Donovan Mitchell last offseason, and now apparently James Harden is also available for them. I don't really know what the deal would look like exactly. I'm sure it would be something resembling either RJ Barrett or Julius Randle, some kind of player that can help, Philly initially, because they are, I believe, still in like championship contention mode, where they would get back either Paul George in the Clipper scenario or, Randle or Barrett in the Knicks scenario. And I'm sure there'd be some other stuff, especially if it's just Barrett. And then you'd have, Maxey, RJ Barrett, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid. And I guess you'd hope to contend with that. But those to me are the 3 teams to pay attention to and keep in mind would be Phoenix somehow, the Clippers, and the Knicks. But I think, honestly, the biggest part of all this, because ultimately I think what Philly gets for Harden is going to be lower than we all expect. And it's not, that part of it is not going to be incredibly interesting other than the fact that this guy just requested a trade to this team 18 months ago, which is just unbelievable. But this is such a massive loss for Philly. Like, they were prepared to possibly lose him straight up in free agency to Houston, but it seemed like we were trending a little bit more in the direction of him wanting to return to Philadelphia, right? And what I would have to assume happened is one of 2 things. Either James Harden just wants to be the primary guy, right? He wants to be the main guy. He doesn't want to go to Houston and be part of the rebuild. He wants to go to a good team where he's the main perimeter player, the main guy that everything runs to. And I guess in his mind, that place is New York or the Clippers. Or 2, and what I think is more likely is the negotiations for a new contract between Harden and Philadelphia got so contentious that at a certain point, he was just like, you know what, I'll opt into this money and I'll find a contract somewhere else where I'm sure there will be more free agency suitors out there. They tried to position themselves with the Houston, they meaning Harden's team, position themselves with the Houston thing to have some leverage against Philadelphia to make them give Harden a lot of money. And I have to imagine that they realized they didn't necessarily have to go all the way to the 4 to 5 year max with all the possible money that they could offer him. And that has led to something that I guess was always a possibility, and that is he can just opt in and then request a trade, and Philly can't really do anything about it. But to me, this is honestly probably more incredible than the KD, the Kyrie thing, any trade requests we've ever had, right? This guy has been, when he goes to his new team, it'd be 4 teams in 4 years, basically. 18 months ago, he wanted to go to Philly. 6 months prior to that, he wanted to go to the Nets, and he wanted out of Houston. This amount of player movement, I think, is one of the reasons that we saw the CBA come into effect the way that it did, and is just completely unprecedented. 18 months after requesting a trade to a place that he ends up going to, that he always, in his words, always wanted to go to, and now he's looking for another destination. It is probably one of the most shocking Twitter phone notifications I've ever gotten in my entire life. Now, if I had to try and guess what this looks like eventually, I would also throw the Miami Heat in there. I don't really think he's like a Heat culture kind of guy, but I would also throw them in there. You can look at, Tyler Hero and some stuff in exchange for James Harden. That would be door number one. I think the Clippers with some kind of Paul George trade, which honestly, if you're Philly, like you probably would just be like, yeah, sure. I mean, this guy's on a 1-year contract. He's proven to be unreliable in terms of wanting to be on the team. If Paul George is healthy, like, they're still contenders. I think that's something that they would look at. Or as I said with the Knicks, it would be RJ or it would be Julius Randle and some other stuff there as well. But I really, really think it's important to point out that you can't sign him to a contract when you trade for him. There's no scenario in which you're trading for James Harden in which he doesn't hit unrestricted free agency in 2024. And clearly, based off this situation, based off Philadelphia's experience with him, based off Brooklyn's experience with him, based off of Houston's experience with him, you cannot predict which way this guy is going to go on a day-to-day basis. And this has thrown a massive wrench, wrinkle, whatever you want to call it, into the early free agency period in the NBA, because I honestly wasn't even thinking about the Harden situation that much, because I just assumed that he was going to be in Philadelphia, or maybe there's like a 10% chance that he signs the contract in Houston. But now, looking back on those Houston rumors that were placed there throughout the season, with this added context, it does make a little bit more sense. He always wanted the bigger number. He always wanted the big contract. From the time that he became, an MVP level guy, he's been getting these huge deals, and his play has declined. And I think Philadelphia recognizes that, and some of the injury stuff and all that. They don't want to position themselves where they're overly indebted to James Harden. And from the time that they leaked the Houston rumor stuff to continuing to make sure that that was a thing to opting into the player option, his motivation has always been, get me to a spot where, yeah, I can win, but also I can maximize what I can make and how long I can make it for. And I'm not mad at him for that. Like, make as much money as you want. He's an incredibly valuable basketball player despite his play declining recently. But this is, we've had some crazy player movement stuff over the last couple of seasons. This might be the most insane. And there are ways that this does still work out for Philly. The Paul George thing specifically, if he's healthy, is at least, relatively interesting. But when you're thinking about the future of Joel Embiid in Philadelphia and possible uncertainty there, like, you go with a new coach. Now Harden is going to be gone. You don't know what you're getting in return for him. This is apart from him just signing a new contract in Houston, this is worst case scenario for Philadelphia.